The crisis in the Niger Republic is not one the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government is taking lightly, with the defiance stance by the Junta in Niger on returning the country to democratic rule. The body has called for another meeting today, which will consider the report of the various envoys sent to mediate on the issue and adopt the next line of action. Moya Thomas has details.
The military junta in Niger has called the bluff of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government, which are threatened to take action if power was not returned to the elected president within 1 week. The ultimatum has relapsed, with the junta still holding onto power. ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government in his earlier meeting had threatened it would do anything to ensure democracy is returned to Niger, including the use of force. This has raised concerns and even debate in many quarters, with analysts questioning the powers of ECOWAS Authority to do so and the impact it may have on Nigeria, which shares the largest land border with Niger, especially the 7 northern states. Some civil society organizations have also taken ECOWAS Authority to the ECOWAS court, seeking restraint from going to war with Niger. This is because the ECOWAS protocol recognizes the sovereignty of every member state. This sovereignty is what the coup plotters are insisting on in daring the authority. The coup plotters have even gone ahead to warn France, the United States, and other Western countries against meddling in their affairs. The Niger junta are further emboldened by the support they have received from Burkina Faso and Mali. It is an indication that these Francophone countries are indeed ready to break free from France, their original colonial powers. The ECOWAS authorities' stand remains that power must transcend in a democratic manner according to the protocol of the regional body. The ECOWAS Protocol on Peace, Security, Stability and Good Governance was recognized in the 1993 treaty. The 2001 Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance in its Article 1C has zero tolerance for power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. It insists on strict adherence to democratic principles. This is the basis that ECOWAS is insisting that President Mohamed Bazoum, who was democratically elected, must be reinstated by the military leaders. The world now looks to ECOWAS to champion the mission of returning democracy to at least Niger, as the body meets on Thursday. Moya Thomas, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, joining us via Zoom is a public affairs commentator, Niger Coup. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
All right, thank you very much for having me. Sincere gratitude for leveraging your platform this morning. Yes, please.
Right. Now, if you look at the papers this morning, it is awash with the matters of the high-powered meeting that will be held today, as well as the visit of the former Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido, to to Niger, despite going there on his personal capacity, but with the knowledge of the president. Now, I wonder what your impressions are of his visit to Niger and the meeting he had with the leader of the coup. It is said to be a meeting that was to open the doors for conversations. I wonder what you make of it.
Well, I think it's important to put things in historical perspective. Niger Republic has about 56% of the population speak Hausa, and there is ethnic and linguistic affinity between Niger Republic and the 7 original Hausa states in Nigeria, and Kano is actually part of it. And let's understand that the Hausa community traditionally are always, showing allegiance to their traditional institutions. So it's the best alternative at the moment to have somebody who is revered, who is respected, and who can help, through the mediation process. Since we've had recommendations made regarding the peace that we hope to foster. So for Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi is highly respected. And for somebody who understands the cultural and religious, activities over there in the Niger Republic, I think it makes all the sense. It's better we actually JoJo than war. So I sincerely commend that move to have peace just around the ECOWAS region. Yeah.
Right, and I'm just wondering what your take is, this breakthrough that we've seem to have made regarding previous visits, including one by the likes of the Sultan of Sokoto, former Nigerian military leader Abdulsalami Abubakar, not forgetting the American delegation too that couldn't gain access, according to the Nigerian side, on the strength of the sentiments within the country who were on the side of the coup leaders. What do you make of how do you reflect on the diplomacy or all the diplomatic efforts so far before the Sanusi intervention, so to speak?
I think that this particular experience gives us one of the rarest opportunity in the history of African politics to address challenges, and Africa are beginning to address those issues that bedevils us since independence. Up until 1993, for the records, Niger never ever had the opportunity of enjoying what it means to have a democratically elected leader. And between that 1993, there was nothing that happened again until 2011, when you have, that should be Yusufi, who was there, and the person wandered over. So you'd have to ask yourself that what is it that Africa is doing that continues to allow it to remain the way it is? For the records, Niger has about only 30% literacy rate, and this same Niger attained independence August the 3rd, 1960. So if you look at the recurrences of coup in the Niger Republic, as well as in some region within the ECOWAS area, you'd find out that not opening people up to the requisite education that makes them become civilized and choose better options for their lives is actually affecting them. But let me say this. When Niger attained independence in 1960, Niger had a leader that was there consistently for 14 years, who never left that position. France continues to relate with that particular person. And I have to say here that for that period of time, the foreign powers that were relating with Niger, for instance, didn't deem it fit to call caution on the person that appears to be a despot. So when you find out that the people that actually planned this coup, as led by Abdurrahmani, are refusing to speak at some points with foreign people or foreign powers, it's because there's a history. And Africa must also begin to self-check its own operation. Let's talk about the West of Africa, for instance. There are some leaders within the West African region, let's just take it from there, that have amended wrongly their constitution to perpetuate themselves in power. And the question is, what did ECOWAS do within those periods that there were needless and wrong alterations to constitution to have allowed them stay there? You also need to ask certain important question here. Guinea had a coup. ECOWAS did not take this stand against Guinea. Burkina Faso had a coup. ECOWAS did not speak strongly to the issue. Mali had a coup. ECOWAS took a sleeping pill and went on snoring. You need to ask the question, why is Niger so different? That even as ECOWAS is speaking, ECOWAS is not speaking to the issues of those three other areas. And that perhaps could be reasons why the coup plotters in Niger Republic are also adamant about wanting to either use force as initially mooted, or the fact that everybody keeps mooting right now, that they should restore Bazoum to power. So I'm simply saying that ECOWAS need to address internal issues of responsible leadership, of responsible representation. So when you look at the issue of those that had wanted to speak to the issues that were not allowed, and you look at the person of Sanusi at the moment, all of these things must not be considered in isolation, because ECOWAS itself must address its issues. And let us also say this. Have you come to terms with one thing, that the Francophone region of within the Sahel region happen not to be the only areas colonized by France? Algeria, you're talking about Morocco, you're talking about Tunisia. These people have a history of colonialism with France. You have to ask yourself, why up until this moment are those people not tied to the teters of France? So I think Africa, especially many countries within the West African region, must begin to assert themselves. And it's important to speak to these issues. So I think that that's how I want to respond to your question.
Right. Now that the doors have been opened to diplomatic action, having conversations with the junta in Niger, I wonder how you would want ECOWAS to take advantage of these doors now that they are meeting today to have a high-powered meeting with the AU representative as well as the representatives from the US. What would you expect to see them address now that the doors have been opened to them?
Okay, there's a particular solution that I just drew up, and I think that because the international community actually watches us, watches your TV station, I think the first thing that ECOWAS must come up with is actually called discipline. I found out among the leaders of Africa that there is a lot of indiscipline regarding coming to power, regarding holding on to power, regarding staying true to whatever it is that they promise to do for their people. I mentioned, when you asked for the last question, Niger Republic has about 30% literacy. What is the discipline regarding the policy on education of every leader within the ECOWAS region? Because you cannot leave people living in 100 years ago, whereas this is 2023. So if everybody who takes power, for instance, understands that holding power means you have to be disciplined with getting the lives of people better, that's going to work. Then ECOWAS must also speak to the issue of discipline. Every leader who assumes office within the ECOWAS region must understand the importance of staying true to the thing that they promise their people. Another thing is integrity. There's a lot of dishonesty even within ECOWAS. We know that Nigeria is a global power considering its position in Africa. So how much of integrity have the leaders within the ECOWAS region been able to actually put on the table? Don't forget that a situation where people repeatedly support military coups between 1960 and now, we've had 11 different incidences happening between the military and the civilian administration in the Niger Republic. 11 on record. And I simply say here that at this moment where lots of Nigerians are rejoicing even after they have captured democratic leadership, it means that there's something about integrity that they need to address within the ECOWAS region. I also want to talk about self-assertion. Let us look at this now. Immediately after the coup, the leaders of the coup severed ties by words from France, from the US and some people, and immediately aligns with Russia and by extension China. It is important for ECOWAS leaders to begin to look at how Africa sees itself as being able to survive by not necessarily aligning with any powers, except of course there are people who have ulterior motives regarding international collaboration. Any country, for instance, in the West or even in the East that has natural resources always negotiates its destiny from a position of power. ECOWAS members within the community must be self-assertive such that if they are making new collaborations and partnerships with the West or the East, it must come from a position of strength. Let me give you this instance.
Before you give that instance, we need to quickly go on a break. When we return, you can continue your line of thought. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Before we went on the break, we were speaking with a public affairs commentator, Adini Kunu, who was talking to us about how ECOWAS could make good use or take advantage of the doors that have been opened to them as we speak, now that they will be having a high-powered meeting later today. And Mr. Adini, you were talking about, you wanted to give an instance, how Africa can assert itself. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you check many nations of the world, Africa has become the bride that nobody can just mess around with, because we've got the youngest population, we've got mineral resources, we've got arable land. And I was talking about collaboration and partnerships among countries of the West. One thing that is fundamental to the success of every nation, particularly the nation that has, that has the resources in terms of what we have, is to be self-assertive. For instance, the Eiffel Tower is powered in its entirety by the uranium they get from the Niger Republic, the entire Eiffel Tower. At the Eiffel Tower, there are two restaurants at the Eiffel Tower. Both restaurants makes up to about 22,000 euros every day. The Eiffel Tower makes in excess of 300 to 400,000 euros every day. In 2019, the last figure I actually checked at the course of my research, the Eiffel Tower grossed in a year calendar 83 million euros. Now you have to come to explain why a country that powers with its resources, France's cash cow, is a country that has to rely on Nigeria for electricity power. That's another question we need to ask ourselves. Self-assertion means that you understand your capacity. And that is actually the fourth point that I've listed, that the ECOWAS members should talk about. What is the capacity of African countries in terms of its resources? How have we allowed ourselves to be shortchanged over the years so that the things that are delivering value to our partners across the Atlantic Ocean are not delivering value to us? If Niger Republic, for instance, has uranium, why is it that the Niger Republic has not been able to actually utilize the entire value chain of uranium and generate its own electricity? If the Niger Republic, for instance, also has gold, why is it that Niger Republic has not been able to utilize the entire value chain of gold as a commodity that is available on the international market through which it can earn foreign exchange? So I'm simply saying that today's meeting is one of the most wonderful opportunities that ECOWAS members have to be able to look at this item that I've given to you. The first is discipline. How disciplined are ECOWAS members when it comes to assuming offices and staying true? How much of integrity do the people within the ECOWAS region, especially the leaders, have in their relationship with those that enables them to assume office? It is what I've said. How much of self-assertion do they have? Is every African country within the ECOWAS region confident enough to look at their partners across the Atlantic Ocean and the first and say, we are able to deploy A, B, C, and D from a point of strength? Let me say this. There's a revolution going on recently within the East African region with the assumption of office of President William Ruto of Kenya. And it begins to talk, sincerely speaking, that is one of the greatest things that has ever happened to Africa. And I think that this has come to the point where those of us that are within the policy research sphere should begin to look at the statements it makes and certain things that it continues to talk about. Let me tell you one of the things that happened to me recently. The United States Trade Department recently wanted some Black professionals in international affairs, and I'm privileged to be among them, wanted to look at how the U.S. can bolster trade with Africa. I was one of about 6 persons across the Black community of the world that had to put recommendations for the United States government regarding what has been happening within countries where resources are taken from. And part of what came into the document that I gave to them, because we had to pull resources together, were about 6 or 7 of us from across the world, and the leader is in Switzerland. So what did I do? I recommended that the U.S. must review how it partners with communities on the African continent that they take these resources from, ditto many other international collaborators, so that you don't have the kind of incidents you have in Niger. So why am I saying this? This opportunity that I have means that many people within the ECOWAS region that have the opportunity of leading, maybe subcategorized offices, must begin to make recommendations strongly regarding areas where most of these resources are taken from. Look at Nigeria, for instance, and the Niger Delta crisis that continue to, disturb the country, but for the wisdom of some leaders who have managed the process. So today, ECOWAS members must begin to even identify anew what is the capacity of the ECOWAS region. And one of the things that can also help is that, you see, you have to negotiate as a group. If you're talking about the ECOWAS region, Nigeria, being the most populous nation in Africa, should oftentimes lead conversations regarding how Africa negotiates with its natural resources, how Africa negotiates with its intelligentsia, how Africa negotiates with those that are the enablers of solutions that have been provided for the West.
All right,
now,
let me put you on hold, Mr. Kunu, especially now that you have gotten to this point of your analysis, because back home in Nigeria, with President Tinubu heading the ECOWAS bloc,
and since ECOWAS had announced that it was considering, military intervention to, bring back, to restore that's Mr. Bazoum as president of Niger. But we've seen so much of the pleas and clamors now by various stakeholders in Nigeria directed at the person of President Tinubu, even though the presidency has said that any resolutions that will be reached by ECOWAS is not something Nigeria alone can take. After all, there are other heads of state who must have a say on the matter. But what do you make of, this back and forth and, the fact that we have Nigeria chairing the bloc now and, what it means for everyone else?
Well, I think that the initial decision of His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to actually, perhaps get an approval to deploy the country's military is what anybody who occupies an office of a status should do. You don't lead from the back, you lead from the front. And the situation in Niger happens to be the situation where some persons have taken power by force. And oftentimes when you have some kinds of force of that nature, the first thing that comes to mind is military intervention and superior firepower so that you can outwit the opponents that took power from a democratically elected person that was in office. So it is not actually out of place for the president to have initially thought of such military intervention. And I think that a lot of people should also understand that the president did not take that decision just because he's going to move the nation's military. Don't forget, he sought approval. That simply means he leveraged the process of getting approval for such. And I think I should indeed commend him for actually going through the process. And for many Nigerians that are talking about why will he do that, perhaps they didn't understand that even the position he assumed as a person who heads ECOWAS is a position where many of the leaders, about 14 others, because there are about 15, 16 members within the ECOWAS region, are looking up to him for. So what he has done is in place. Now, the back and forth of ECOWAS and many other people there is simply because they've not been able to come to the audience table with clean hands. And anybody who actually comes to equity must do so with hands that are free of stain. Let's look at Ivory Coast, for instance. Ivory Coast is an iniquitous country. And I say that very deliberately. Two persons that should have assumed office died mysteriously. Well, death can take anybody once their time is up. But what about altering the constitution of the country, supported by France, such that France looked away because everything that Alassane Ouattara does favors them? Before Alpha Conde was sent packing there, what happened to Alpha Conde? Alpha Conde got the support of France. So many people within the ECOWAS region themselves have not actually done what they should have done right for their own people. So the prevarication that has been happening is as a result of the fact that many of them, for instance, have not done it right. Let's look at Nigeria.
All right, because we have limited time, I want to quickly throw in this question and get your perspective to this matter. Now, there are concerns with regards to a return to constitutional order. I wonder, what do you think with regards to that? Do you see that happening anytime soon?
It is possible because in the 11 juncture checkered history of Nigerian politics, we've had about 3 times or so where military leaders were able to enable a transition to democratic rule. Don't forget that the transition that resulted in the leadership of Yusufu, the predecessor of Bazoum, was enabled within a year by a military leader. So I think that what ECOWAS can do is to really speak to the issue of enabling a continuation or perhaps a re-engineering of a transition. But it's going to be difficult to actually have Bazoum get completely taken out of the picture because he's actually the democratically elected leader. So I think that there are possibilities if these recommendations that I've made are really followed through. And let us not see that things are negative. We can have an ECOWAS community that actually is somewhat peaceful. Do not also forget that Niger is very strategic with regards to how it has helped deal with the issues of insurgency, particularly in collaboration with those within the Sahel region. So I think that there are possibilities. I can only try as much as possible to see the light in the horizon of some form of amicable solution so that we can all get together again as those within a very peaceful community here in Africa.
Now, when you're talking about amicable solution, quickly in a minute, talk to us what you mean, if you can expatiate on that.
Okay, what I'm talking about amicable solution is that those representing the respective ECOWAS community members are able to look at the grievances of those who have taken over power now. What are the specifics of it? Is it that the disaffection is as a result of the fact that Bazoum is actually from a minority tribe? Do not forget when President Goodluck Jonathan, former President Jonathan, came to power, it was a shocker to everybody, and he had his own specific challenges whilst there. Are they uncomfortable with the fact that Bazoum is from a minority person and the fact that he appears to be taking over power? Don't forget that the person, Abdurrahmani, who even took over the government through a coup, happened to be somebody who had been the leader of the presidential guard for about 10 years. And perhaps there are things he knows that many people do not know, or there are certain things his predecessor told him that he did that Bazoum doesn't even know. So when we talk about amicable, it nullifies any possibility of military bloodshed or intervention. It employs the best of people who are believed to have integrity. For instance, there's a level of integrity with Sanusi, and that's why it could be acceptable over there.
All right,
yes,
we'll have to leave this conversation here now.
Thank you very much.
We have run out of time. Adeni Ukunu, Public Affairs commentator, thank you for your time.